In 1967, when America thought it had already seen the wildest machines on its streets, Shelby quietly built a Mustang so extreme it was never meant for showrooms. Today, we uncover the mysterious origin of the muscle car born for a secret mission and nearly lost to history. Settle in and take this ride at your own pace, and remember to subscribe to American Muscle Soul for more untold legends. By 1967, the American muscle car landscape was louder and more competitive than ever. Pontiac, Chevrolet, and Ford were locked in a horsepower war, and the Shelby GT500 had already earned its place as one of the decade's defining street machines. To most drivers, it seemed the Mustang had reached a natural peak. That belief held strong across the country. Yet, inside the Shelby American shop in Los Angeles, something felt different. There was a quiet sense of anticipation around a single fastback sitting deeper in the workshop. Mechanics passed by it with a focus that did not match routine production. It looked like a standard GT500, but the careful attention surrounding it hinted at something far from ordinary. What the public did not know was that this car was not being prepared for showrooms, magazines, or even Ford's performance lineup. It was being shaped for a purpose that no one associated with a street Mustang. That purpose would soon push the car far beyond the expectations of the era. Shelby was preparing to create a machine so extreme and so singular that it would never be repeated. The story behind the Super Snake truly began when Goodyear approached Carroll Shelby with a challenge. The company needed to test its new Thunderbolt tire under real American driving conditions, but at speeds and durations no ordinary production car could maintain. They did not want a purpose-built race car. They wanted something recognizable to drivers across the country, yet capable of surviving hours of high-speed punishment. Shelby understood that this request demanded a unique solution. A regular GT500 could not withstand the relentless heat and strain of such a test. A GT40 would be too specialized and too revealing. What Goodyear needed was a familiar silhouette hiding extraordinary strength. Shelby chose a 1967 fastback because it offered practicality, durability, and the perfect cover for an extreme assignment. Shelby then turned to his chief engineer, Goodell, to determine how far the transformation must go. Goodell quickly concluded that nothing short of an endurance racing engine would survive the task. This decision set the direction of the entire project. From the moment the Le Mans-proven 427 cubic inch heart was chosen, the car no longer resembled a production Mustang in anything but appearance, and this is where the answer to the question from Part 1 becomes clear. The cost of the engine, the specialized components, and the labor required to build such a machine made it impossible to sell at any realistic price. The car was conceived strictly for Goodyear's secret test, not as a product for customers. Because its mission was singular and its construction far exceeded commercial feasibility, the 1967 Shelby GT500 Super Snake was always destined to remain a one-off creation. With the mission defined and the car chosen, the Shelby team began reshaping the 1967 fastback into something no GT500 owner would ever expect. Instead of focusing on cosmetic cues or the familiar Shelby touches, the engineers concentrated on structural readiness for endurance work. They reinforced mounting points that normally never required attention, reworked cooling paths to move air through the body more efficiently, and tuned suspension components to remain stable at speeds far beyond what the standard Mustang chassis was ever meant to sustain. Inside the cockpit, gauges were recalibrated for continuous high-load monitoring, and the interior was stripped of anything that did not directly serve the car's long-distance purpose. Even the ergonomics were adjusted for a driver who would remain at speed for hours rather than moments. Every decision reflected the same guiding thought. This Mustang was not being prepared for thrill seekers or public roads. It was being engineered as a long-range instrument, a machine expected to behave with the discipline of an endurance prototype while keeping its familiar silhouette. This shift in design philosophy marked the point where the Super Snake separated itself completely from the production GT500. The outside still resembled the streetcar America knew, but the structure beneath was being reshaped for a test that no road-going Shelby had ever been asked to survive. When the chassis preparation was complete, the defining element of the Super Snake emerged under the hood. Goodell selected a 427 cubic inch engine with roots in endurance competition, a power plant chosen not for peak numbers, but for its ability to maintain ferocious speed without faltering. Its aluminum heads, forged rotating assembly, and carefully balanced internals were built to tolerate hours of sustained stress. This was not an engine that needed to be protected from heat. It was an engine built to thrive in it. The bundle of Snake's exhaust optimized flow and kept temperatures even across the cylinders, while high-flow induction and precise carburation delivered a smooth, unwavering power band. Everything around the engine supported its endurance role, from the heavy-duty 4-speed gearbox to the rear axle ratio selected for long-distance velocity rather than acceleration. Cooling was upgraded as if the car were preparing for a desert endurance rally, and the lubrication system was refined to keep vital components alive through prolonged strain. Once the hood closed, the transformation felt almost surreal. The familiar Mustang outline now hid a mechanical temperament shaped by endurance racing rather than street performance, giving the Super Snake a character that belonged to no other Shelby of its time. Once the Super Snake's Le Mans-bred power plant and reinforced drivetrain were complete, the car was transported to Texas, where its true purpose would be revealed on the wide, wind-swept expanse of Goodyear's San Angelo test track. The site had a way of humbling even the strongest machines, with long straights that punished engines and crosswinds that exposed the weaknesses of any chassis not built for consistency. For the Shelby crew, watching their creation roll onto that surface marked the moment theory became reality. Carroll Shelby arrived with the confidence of a man who had seen both victories and failures across continents, and he wanted to feel the car himself before anyone else touched the wheel. Sliding into the cockpit, he eased the car onto the straight until the big block settled into a rhythm, and when the tires warmed and the air cleared, he pushed harder. The Super Snake climbed past triple-digit speeds with a steadiness that felt almost unreal for a Mustang-shaped body, and when Shelby passed 170 miles per hour, the team realized they were witnessing something far beyond a simple tire test. After proving the car's stability, Shelby stepped out and handed the assignment to Fred Goodell, whose task was far more demanding than a top-speed run. The real test required the Super Snake to maintain punishing velocity for hundreds of miles on the very tire Goodyear sought to validate. Goodell took the wheel with the calm of an engineer who knew exactly what every mechanical sound meant. He settled the car at a speed most drivers would only touch for a few seconds, and he kept it there, lap after lap, allowing the endurance-bred engine to do the work it was built for. The sound of the 427 cubic inch V8 echoed across the Texas track in a steady, unwavering tone as the hours passed. When the run eventually ended, the data showed an average speed above 142 miles per hour over roughly 500 miles, a number that made Goodyear's engineers nod with quiet satisfaction. The test had achieved everything it set out to prove. The tires held, the car survived, and the 1967 Shelby GT500 Super Snake had demonstrated that a Mustang silhouette could live in a world usually reserved for endurance racers. It was no longer just a technical experiment, it had become a piece of American automotive folklore. When the Super Snake rolled back into the Shelby shop after its punishing Texas trial, it carried with it the quiet pride of a machine that had done something no Mustang had been asked to do before. Yet even as the dust settled, the conversation inside Shelby American began to shift from technical achievement to possibility. Don McCain, the high-performance sales manager who understood both Shelby's customers and their hunger for exclusivity, saw more than a successful tire test. He saw a chance to build a limited run of cars that would sit above every other Mustang Shelby had ever created, a series of 50 Super Snakes built for the most devoted performance buyers in the country. The idea sparked excitement. But excitement alone could not overcome the realities of what such a program required. To recreate the Super Snake for customers meant recreating everything that made it survive San Angelo, including the Le Mans grade 427 cubic inch engine and all the specialized components that supported it. Every part of that powertrain had been built to a standard far beyond a traditional street car, and every hour of labor required engineers who understood a level of precision usually reserved for Shelby's racing efforts. As McCain and the team ran the numbers, it became painfully clear that the cost of building these cars would eclipse the price of even the 427 Cobra, a machine already known as a high-dollar purchase for its time. Asking buyers to pay more for a Mustang than for a Cobra simply was not realistic, no matter how exceptional the car might be. Shelby knew that performance had to live within economic limits, and this project lived far outside those boundaries. The Super Snake had been built for a specific mission, not for a showroom floor, and the parts that made it legendary were too expensive and too rare to place into a small production run. With that understanding, the idea of building 50 customer cars quietly faded. The single test vehicle remained the only one of its kind, not because the team lacked the skill to reproduce it, but because the world at that moment was not ready to pay the price required to bring such a machine to the public. As the discussions closed and the project wrapped, the Super Snake's future shifted away from what might have been and toward an unusual journey that would eventually carry it through drag strips, private garages, and decades of obscurity. The legacy of the car as a one-off creation had already been decided, even if no one yet understood what that would mean for its place in history. As the Super Snake left the Shelby facility for the last time in the late 60s, no one imagined how far from its original purpose the car's path would drift. With the canceled production run behind it, the lone prototype was sold through a California dealer for a figure far below what its engineering represented. From there, it entered the lives of private owners who saw it not as a historical artifact but simply as an exceptionally strong Mustang. In the years that followed, the car found its way onto drag strips, where its endurance-bred 427 cubic inch heart delivered the kind of straight-line force that local racers rarely encountered. It was pushed, tuned, and raced as if it were just another big block Shelby, even though nothing about it truly was. Time was unkind to many muscle cars of the era, but the Super Snake survived its years of hard use and eventually resurfaced when collectors began digging deeper into Shelby history. As muscle car culture matured, enthusiasts and historians pieced together the story of the one-off tire test Mustang that carried a Le Mans engine under familiar fastback lines. What emerged was a recognition that this machine existed outside the normal lineage of Shelby production. It was not created for competition, not created for retail, and not created for publicity. It represented a rare moment when race engineering, street car design, and corporate testing needs collided to create something no one planned to preserve. When the car finally reached auction blocks in restored form, its past was no longer a mystery whispered among collectors. It became a proven narrative, supported by Shelby American records, Goodyear documentation, and first-hand accounts from Fred Goodell. Bidders saw in the Super Snake not just rarity but significance, and the car's value soared into the millions, breaking Mustang records and cementing its status as the holy grail of Shelby machines. What had once been a tool for a tire test had become a treasured piece of American automotive history, appreciated at last for the singular creation it always was. As the Super Snake settled into its new life as a prized collector car, its meaning within the larger story of American performance became clearer. The 1967 Shelby GT500 Super Snake was never meant to be a production model, a racer, or a marketing centerpiece. It began as a tool for a specialized test and survived only because its engineering was too exceptional to be forgotten. In a decade defined by horsepower battles and big block bravado, it stood apart not by being louder or flashier, but by carrying a level of endurance and stability that came straight from the world of international racing. Its very existence bridged two cultures that rarely overlapped: the gritty American muscle scene and the precise, unforgiving realm of Le Mans endurance design. Collectors who saw the car in person often remarked that it felt familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. The fastback shape, the scoops, the stance, all resembled the GT500s that roamed American highways in the late 60s. But the presence of the 427 cubic inch Le Mans engine beneath that fiberglass hood gave it an aura usually reserved for prototypes or factory-backed racers. It was a Mustang that looked ready for Woodward Avenue but carried the heartbeat of a machine built to survive day-long flat-out runs on foreign soil. That unusual mix, preserved in a single survivor, is what makes its story impossible to replicate. Today, enthusiasts look at the Super Snake and see more than a rare machine. They see a snapshot of a moment in American engineering when limits were tested simply because someone asked whether it could be done. They see a Mustang that lived at the edge of what its era understood, and they see a reminder that some legends are not created by marketing or racing trophies, but by quiet decisions made in workshops far from public view. And as people gather around the car at museums, auctions, or private showings, many come away with the same thought. If Shelby had ever built all 50 cars that Don McCain imagined, the history of muscle cars might read very differently. If you ever wondered how far a Mustang could be pushed when no rulebook stood in the way, the 1967 Shelby GT500 Super Snake is your answer. As the only one of its kind, it asks a question that still stirs the imagination. What stories might have filled American roads If 50 of these machines had been unleashed into the world, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, give the video a like and subscribe to American Muscle Soul so you never miss the next chapter.